Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Reports are emerging that this week Lewis Hamilton will visit the Mercedes engineers in Brackley to ensure they are making the changes he has requested for next year's W15. 2 years in a row now the Mercedes comes to Suzuka and gets destroyed by the competition, and even McLaren, a Mercedes customer team, have made massive progress with their car in terms of aero after taking inspiration heavily from the Red Bull earlier on. Hamilton seems to believe that his engineers haven't been fully on board with his vision so far and wants to correct that in a critical 6 months of development from now until the start of next season. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Loads of new subs yesterday, love to see that one. Loads of updates today as well. Firstly, Red Bull are saying they have to make a decision soon between what's going to happen with Perez, what's going to happen with Ricciardo, both of them over 30. Perez will go at some point. It's a matter of when, and to be honest, Perez is trying his best, it seems at the moment, to lose his seat for 2024, let alone when he's, for sure, I think, going to be gone in 2025. Now, a rumour was emerging last night that Liam Lawson, who is currently out of the picture, has been guaranteed a seat in 2025 if he agrees to just be the reserve at Red Bull for one more year. The latest update on this rumour is that he said yes and has agreed to do this simulator reserve role for 2024, as they've said, you know what, Liam, sorry we can't give you a seat this year. To be honest, I think he was probably going to get Tsunoda's seat, but then Honda came along and said, look, we'll give you more money, keep Yuki in the seat, fine. And I expect that Yuki will leave Red Bull once or that program, because it doesn't seem like they see Tsunoda. I think Tsunoda's good, but I don't think they see him as Verstappen's partner, and therefore he will be gone at some point. 4 years in that sister team is more than most drivers get for sure. And I expect him to probably go with Honda to Aston Martin in a couple of years. That may or may not happen, depends on Stroll, we'll see. That's certainly an option. But for the time being, with Danny Rick and Tsunoda confirmed in that seat, Perez trying his best to lose his seats, but probably is still going to keep it for next season, and obviously Verstappen, that leaves Liam Lawson out of the picture. It's possible he could go and join Williams. They, I'm sure, must be considering an alternative to Sargent. There's been talks about Felipe Drugovich as well, last year's Formula 2 champion, as a possibility as well, so we'll see what happens there. And even Théo Pourchaire said that he was very close to getting a seat with Alfa Romeo, but well, Zhou got extended, potentially for monetary reasons. Somewhat difficult to say, but the rumour is that Lawson has said, you know what guys, I'll do it, whatever. One more year as a reserve, as long as you can guarantee me a seat in 25. Whether that's at AlphaTauri, and whether they bring Ricciardo into the Red Bull seat instead of Perez, and then maybe it's Tsunoda Lawson at AlphaTauri, or it won't be called AlphaTauri then, but whatever, or whether that's straight into the Red Bull, which seems unlikely, but, you know, they've tried these things before, and, well, usually they don't work, to be fair. But Lawson has clearly got an awful lot of talent. Now, Mercedes this weekend had so much drama going on. There was, well, as we talked about yesterday, this transcript between Russell and his engineer and the situation with Hamilton, and it's been all a little bit controversial, and even Hamilton's statement, there might not be anything in this, but people are reading into it, so I thought I'd mention it at the very least. Hamilton came out on Instagram and said, not the best result, but make no mistake, the talent in my team is incredible. Did he need to say my team? Maybe not. Is he trying to say, look, George, this is my team, like, not yours yet, buddy, type thing? Because Hamilton, probably George Russell expected by at least 2024, Hamilton at this point would have retired, he'd be the leader of the team. That's not the case. Hamilton seems hungrier than ever, is probably driving more aggressively than ever over the last, as we saw, especially this weekend, and is intent on getting back to the top. So, yeah, it's not going, I imagine, how Russell pictured it to, this stint in Mercedes, especially because I imagine he thought the cars would be somewhat better, which they have not been over the last couple of seasons. They messed around with the zero pod stuff, they eventually abandoned it. Has the car got massively better since then? Not really, to be honest. It's, in terms of competitiveness, it's not too dissimilar at this point compared to last year's W13. And actually, the biggest point scorer since Austria has been Lando Norris, and the biggest team point scorer outside of Red Bull since Silverstone has been McLaren, not Ferrari or Mercedes, or Aston Martin, of course, which is kind of remarkable to think about. Now, unfortunately, Lando has got this record to his name now, which is most points without a win. And okay, you can look at Heidfeld and you can look at some of the previous points standings. And obviously, if you look at the amount of starts that Norris has had without winning, he's had significantly less than these others. And at least has been on a podium unlike Hulkenberg, but still not a record that Norris will want to have. But honestly, right now, it looks like Lando is just one max DNF away from actually getting his first victory. And Mercedes are falling back into their clutches. Now, this is the F1.5 driver standings. If you exclude the two Red Bulls and just see what the points would be, this would be the point standings. So Hamilton is actually ahead of Alonso in the actual point standings, but when you consider the race wins Alonso would have had at the start of the season, he's slightly ahead, but Hamilton will overtake him in the F1.5 standings, it seems, in the near future. But the Ferraris have closed up on the Mercedes. They're only 20 points behind in the constructors. The McLarens are now most of the time a straight up faster car as their customer team. These were the race pace numbers this weekend, with Verstappen averaging a 1:37.2 in the race, Norris a very impressive 1:37.5, and yes, I'm sure there was more pace in Verstappen. Hamilton was about 9 tenths behind, very similar to their pace in qualifying, actually faster than the two Ferraris, but you know, he had the battles with Russell that cost him a bit of time, and not too far behind Piastri actually, but still, the lead Mercedes roughly a second a lap slower than Verstappen on a very heavy aero-dependent circuit like Suzuka. You know, your car needs to be good at generating downforce and balance to be good at Suzuka, and the Red Bull is going to be very good at that, as is the McLaren, having taken heavy inspiration from their design. Let's not forget, right, McLaren at the start of the season were on average 1.2 seconds off pole for the first several races. They have been on average 4 tenths off pole for the last several races, which is very impressive, the direction they've made. And Hamilton, as has everybody, has seen this and said, look, that's what McLaren have done. They took their time bringing these upgrades, this effectively like B-spec looking car, really. It looks like a Red Bull. They've taken big inspiration from Red Bull, and they, at circuits like Suzuka, are now Red Bull's closest challenger. Hamilton says, we need to have the best 6 months of development here at Mercedes that we've ever had in order to close that gap to Red Bull, which is frankly unlikely, but Hamilton is going to try and make it happen by turning up to the factory and telling them what he thinks. And even as Hamilton says, the laps on Saturday felt really good. It's just they're a second down on the Red Bull. To be a second down on a track like this is worrying for us as a team. He says we're just lacking rear downforce. The front end of the Mercedes is pretty good. It's the rear downforce they've struggled with. And yes, they would have brought an entirely new chassis this season with probably an entirely new rear suspension design had they had infinite money. But as it stands, the cost cap, they couldn't do that. They're stuck with what they have, and they're stuck struggling to understand this car fully. The discussion over the winter from Mercedes this most recent season was that they had decided not to be incredibly ambitious. They wanted to fix the porpoising and they wanted good performance, but they realized that actually they hadn't been ambitious enough with their progression from the 13 to the 14, and now they're saying, all right, we're going to be very ambitious. We're going to change the car considerably. Whether or not we can solve all the issues, that depends on many projects delivering. So yeah, the car will be very different, and it's quite clear that come next season, there's going to be like at least 5 or 6 Red Bulls on the grid, and it's probably about time that's the case. Does that mean that Red Bull will have the best handle on their concept? Yes. Does it mean Red Bull probably win the championship again next year? Yes. Does it mean we get closer racing at the front and more different race winners? Probably also yes. So Hamilton even mentioned at the start of the season and even during last year to the media and also to his engineers, look guys, we're not going the right way here. We need to take inspiration from the Red Bull, and as he now says, the evidence is there with the McLarens. We can't turn a blind eye to that. We've got to look at what they've done, go in that direction. That is the direction, the kind of heavy downwash design of that Red Bull side pod, the way their floor works with it, the rear suspension design, the anti-squat, the anti-dive design that we've talked about before in some great length that's giving Red Bull so much of a race pace advantage. So Hamilton says, look, I know what the problem is with the car. It's about getting the guys to make the changes. I try to argue my point, but it's not my job to design the car. It sounds like he thinks they haven't fully been listening to him. Now, does he know, as a driver, how to actually physically design the parts to put the downforce on the car where he wants it? Not necessarily. Does he know how the car should feel, how it should behave, how, where the downforce should be, what changes to make? Almost certainly yes. How you execute that for Mercedes, that's on them. But Hamilton probably knows a thing or two about how he wants the car to handle and what changes they should make. So now we're getting rumours that this week he's going to go to Brackley. He's going to visit the team, and maybe he'd have done this anyway just because a couple of weeks off before Qatar. But he is visiting, and he said this himself, Mercedes engineers this week to check on the W15 in the wind tunnel, to see if they are making the changes that he has requested. So, and there's also been further rumours on this to say that he has requested a series of meetings to closely monitor the progress of the works for 2024. So, you know, we know that Hamilton's very hungry. He's very committed to making this project work, but he's also wanting to be very closely intertwined, because I remember an interview he did, I think it was at the Hungarian Grand Prix with Heikki Kovalainen, actually was interviewing him during 2022. And he said at the time that he doesn't want his engineers to be too arrogant about the W13 and that the zero pod concept is actually good. And he was trying to say to them at the time, look guys, if the Red Bull is better, as it seems to be, let's heavily consider that. The fact of the matter is, Mercedes have wasted another entire season on a concept that doesn't really work. And yes, they probably have an entirely new chassis by now, and the W14 or W15, sorry, will be dramatically different in the same way that next year's Ferrari will be dramatically different. I'm sure there are some parts of the W14 and even the W13 they will want to maintain some positive attributes, but the W14, especially now, doesn't really seem to have. Last year's car, for example, had very good tyre degradation. The W14 doesn't really have that compared to its rivals. And, I mean, the Red Bull is just so easy on its tyres, it's almost insane. Probably because Verstappen doesn't have to drive it that hard, but those tyres on the Red Bull just don't degrade. So even that advantage is now gone, and it makes you wonder, what do they even want to keep on the W15? And if they do want to keep certain elements of it, is that actually a good idea? So Hamilton wants to know that they're doing the right thing, because, you know, he signed a contract for next year and 2025. Does he want to have to wait for 2026 with a brand new regs to have a chance? No. Is that going to be the reality of the situation? Quite possibly yes, because Red Bull and Verstappen are probably going to win everything until that season, but of course it's not fully guaranteed. And then that raises the question, which team is the most likely to challenge Red Bull next year? McLaren, they wasted 1 year, but they only wasted 1 year. They've made big progress this season, McLaren, and if they can make another jump next season, they could be in a good spot. Will it be enough as a customer team to fight Red Bull? I don't think so, but McLaren should be close. Ferrari should be close, and Mercedes, I think on paper, let's be honest, since 2010, every world championship has been won by Mercedes or Red Bull. So it seems implausible for that to change next year, given the current circumstances. But are Mercedes actually in the best position to execute on this? Hamilton thinks that they can if they absolutely nail their development for the next 6 months, but the reality is quite possibly not. Aston Martin as well, they're in an interesting spot because they made mega progress at the start of this season, taking some inspiration from Red Bull, but they've gone the wrong direction in their development, no doubt. Dan Fallows needs to reconsider what their plan is going to be because, yeah, Red Bull keep on pushing forward, and Aston Martin have not done so. Just wanted to mention this before we close out the video, that Max Verstappen will almost certainly win the World Drivers' Championship during the Qatar sprint race. All he's got to do is finish P6 or higher, and if Perez doesn't score any points, then he doesn't have to score any points either. So this is basically going to happen. It would be, it's funny, right? Because Max's championships, both of them he's won, have been won in a crazy fashion either. After hours and really days and weeks of speculation and controversy after 2021. 2022, he won in Japan. He didn't even know he'd won it. Nobody knew he'd won it. He didn't really get to talk about it on the radio. It was an absolute shambles because the rules were funky with the red flag and the half points that actually didn't come true. And then this year, he's going to win it in a sprint race. Would be even goofier if, like, let's say Checo DNFs, or let's say DNSs, right? Let's say Checo's car breaks down on the out lap or the formation lap. Then Max will be the champion before the sprint race has even started. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.